So we've lined up some speakers for this 3 hour marathon, and we thought we would um, invite people who work in the space with us consumers, who hold our hands through different care transitions, who know the law, who know how to get us what we need, whether it's appropriate care, financial stuff, um, insurances, the right next thing to do in a care transition. And I thought of a woman named Ida Como, who, when we were in our care transition, where I was at that moment of, do I have to institutionalize my husband or do I keep him at home? But if he's institutionalized, who's going to pay for that? How does that work? Didn't expect my husband to get sick. What do we do with our assets? We didn't plan for this. We're not 70, 80 years old. We're trying to live our life. And I was brought to a woman named Ida Como, who does estate planning and Medicaid applications for institutional settings. And I have her bio here somewhere. But anyway, she's on, and I wanted to invite her to sort of what I'm going to do now before we go to the next guest is give a huge shout out to Ida, and like literally read her bio because it's so inspiring. And I'm really proud of her, and I'm really honored that my husband and I ran into her at a very critical juncture. Gosh, it was 2000. I don't even remember anymore. 13. I don't remember. But you were born and raised in Brooklyn section of born and raised of the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn by your Italian parents who immigrated to New York and instilled hardworking and driven characteristics that you obviously, as you guys have seen today, display proudly. Your dad was born in Sicily and your mother in Naples. After graduating with honors from St. John's University in Jamaica, Queens, you went to do a lifelong goal of attending Hofstra School of Law. You worked as a paralegal for Milberg LLP, which was a complex litigation law firm, and interned at the New Jersey Federal Public Defender's Office and at Russo, Keen and Toner LLP, which was largely insurance defense. You became a member of the New York and New Jersey bars, and you began your legal career at Connors and Sullivan. This is where your elder law was ignited, and you joined in 2014 Giovanni Silvani. I never say his name right. I'm so sorry.
Silvani.
Silvani. Share with us and have a casual conversation about that moment in time of when a family member, needs to start their Medicaid spend down or not Medicaid spend down. And so without further ado, please help me welcome Ida Como, who is one of the New York's top lawyers. And her husband have a wonderful business with helping caregivers and families when they're met in this moment in time where they need to understand how the money works. So welcome, Ida.
Hi, thank you for
Hi.
having me. Thank you for thinking of us, Marcella, and I'm glad to be here. Um, so a little bit about what I do for people who may be in the situations that you described. One of the most important things you can do, the best things you can do for yourself and your family is to try to plan. But that doesn't always happen, and things come up, situations arise where you would never have thought that you needed to plan. But in the event that that does happen, and Marcella, I think, kind of went through this firsthand, and I go through it with people on a daily basis firsthand, when those situations arise before you make any decisions on your own, you can talk to someone in my position, doesn't have to be me, but someone who knows a little bit more about the rules, and the insurance part of institutionalizing a person, or how to keep them home if they can stay home, um, and just explore your options before you decide, well, I'm out of options. I don't think there's anyone who's ever really truly out of options in this situation, because there are things out there, there are programs out there, there are ways to help yourself and your family, to do this to go through this really tough time in the most gracious way possible, or as you can, as possible, as much as you can. Um, and I don't know if I want to, I'm open to questions. Like I said, I'm an elder law attorney. We do asset planning, Medicaid planning, but we also do process applications, and it's all of it's for long-term care, not for like, it's all for over 65 or for people who are disabled and need long-term care. So that's our wheelhouse. And I hope that maybe I could reach one person today who has a question who I could answer.
I have like a human question because I want this as, in terms of, and I'll just, you can spend 2 minutes on it or, however, so other people have questions because I want the whole day today here to be about the human aspect of it. What are the top three sort of human reactions you experience with your clients, not divulging confidentiality by any means, of when they're met with this moment of having to plan or having to process that they might have to have the Medicaid in order to institutionalize their loved one, all that. Like, what are if there was three words, because I know what it is for me, but as you on the across the table, you have to handhold people.
Um, I think the first word that came to mind when you were asking the question was overwhelmed. Most people feel overwhelmed, if I can, I'll just maybe give a little like an approach to try to fix that. If you feel overwhelmed, maybe try taking it one step at a time and thinking of it, compartmentalizing all the tasks that you have to handle. Because when you're living with someone who's in this situation, it's a lot that you have to handle, and taking things one step at a time, or trying to organize like a list of what you could do to help yourself not feel so overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, anxious, sad, um, and probably kind of attuned to what you guys were saying before. You feel like a part of it may be something you did or could have done differently. Those are probably the way people mostly feel when they first come to me. They first come into this situation, and I hope that when they leave, we try to figure out a way for them not to feel those things and maybe to feel a little more comfort. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think what I'm hearing you say is like there's no wrong here. Like, we get to that moment when we get to that moment, right? Like it's different for everybody. I think that's one of the things we struggle with in advocacy is that it's not one size fits all, right? So there's no handbook for every family. It's the same way. And this is stage one, stage two, stage three, stage four of a spend down or deciding if it's person's ready for an institutional setting or not. It's just not one size fits all.
No,
Would you agree?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Every single situation is different, even if you think it's the same. We hear stories from people that say, well, so and so had to do this, and so I guess that's what I have to do. That's what want to do. And we have to step back and say, each person is different. Tell me everything about your situation, and we'll try to come up with an individualized plan for everyone. Separate and apart from someone else. Yeah, at the end of the day, they're being institutionalized, and so are other people, and it's the same type of process, but everyone's family dynamic, financial situation is different. So there's a individualized plan for every person.
That's great. And probably a lot of tears. I know I went through a lot of tears. Like, I can't believe this is happening. But I remember what you always said. You just kept saying, just keep doing the next right thing. Keep one foot in front of the other. So I really appreciate that. Were there anybody that is listening or have any questions for Ida at all as we continue to explore the conversation of this care transition? Um, because I'd like to talk about the Medicaid thing too. So I know you do a lot of Medicaid applications. Do you have any thoughts on the fear of the Medicaid cuts and all that's happening on a federal level.
Sorry. Yes. I think there's a lot of fear mongering going on in the media. I don't think you should really be too concerned with that at the moment. Um, I don't think any, I don't think Medicaid as we know it is going to change so drastically because I don't think anyone here would let it happen, especially in New York. We happen to have one of the most um, comprehensive and uh, I think best kind of Medicaid plans in New York. We have all these programs that you can use to help you to qualify or help you to continue to get Medicaid and keep income, certain things like that, that a lot of other states just don't have. Um, and I don't think that the bar, the attorneys and everyone who does work in this field and advocates for elder law, I don't think they're going to let it happen. And I don't think the legislature is gonna put major cuts through like that. I know there's been a change in the CD-PATH program, but even that, implementing that is just, it's going to take a really long time for it to actually affect, I think, people who are already on Medicaid. And even if it does, I'm sure there are ways that we could continue to do what's being done pretty much now.
I think so too. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend about the Medicaid, and actually it was a nurse, and she said that in India, a lot of people have more savings. They work and work and work and work. It's a different culture, and in America, like we work hard, we spend. We come to that moment where my husband got sick. Okay, oh gosh, but New York State is that they got the spousal refusal. And she just doesn't think because of that, there's just too much of a dense population that needs the Medicaid insurance for whether you're in the community or you're in an institution, senior living
Institution.
facility. But I also want to pivot a little bit to that number part of it, whereby is it New York, Florida, and California have the spousal refusal? Um, because I always think about how the people who want to cut Medicaid for disabled loved ones or people who have to use it, um, like how much my husband has cost the federal. He's been 9 years in a nursing home, so we're over $1 million now of him being alive. He's worth it. He's worth, he's not a number. But that there's people in the world that believe he's a burden because he's costing the state or federal, taxpayer dollars, over $1 million to be alive. And do I have to pay that back as a wife, or how that all works? Curious.
So you want me to go into, I don't know about other states' spousal refusal, but I can go into a little bit about New York State's spousal refusal. Spousal refusal, and I saw a question pop up like, what is that? What are you talking about? When a person is married but wants to apply for Medicaid for long-term care, what they look at whether or not you qualify for Medicaid by looking at your assets, your income, and seeing if you're below those figures that we were talking about. When you're married, everything is considered an asset to the husband and to the wife, unless the spouse signs a spousal refusal. There's something called spousal refusal, which says, I don't want my income to be counted towards my spouse's income for Medicaid application. Or I can't because I wouldn't be able to live. If you take my income away, I won't be able to live, and then I'll have to get Medicaid. And so the government says, well, you know what? Instead of taking the money away from a person who could stay in the community if they keep their income, we're going to allow this person to sign a form that says, I'm not going to give the government my income from my spouse. You can use his income as a resource, but not mine. That's a part of the spousal refusal. And then there's another part for assets as well. They've come up with this plan that says, well, you know what, a person whose spouse maybe needs care, they can have their own money and allow for the spouse to get Medicaid. And you sign the form saying, I'm not giving any of my assets towards care for my husband because I can't. I need to keep it for myself. I'm just using husband and wife as a scenario, but it can be either way. Um, so that's what spousal refusal is. Now, as far as can they come back and sue you, which is something Marcella mentioned, there is a limit technically to how much Medicaid will allow a spouse to have, signing the spousal refusal saying, I'm not going to give this amount of money. I'm going to keep it. I need it for my own care. That limit is about $154,000, I think it is this year. If you have more, if your spouse is going into an institution or going on community Medicaid, whatever it is for long-term care, you can sign the spousal refusal, say, I'm not giving any of my assets that are in my name alone to my husband or wife. If you have more than $150,000, then when your spouse, and they'll allow you to have that money, whatever it is, even if it's $1 million, and use it for your lifetime and keep it. But when your spouse passes away, you will have to give all of your information about your assets to Medicaid, and they'll excuse it. They'll say, okay, we're not going to take any of that into consideration. But when that person passes away, then they can come back and sue you if you have more than the allowable limit in your name, even if you sign a spousal refusal. So it's important to know that and maybe do some planning on your own at the juncture when you're thinking about, or when you have to, you're forced into the situation of whether, a person can go into a facility or needs to be at home or whatever happens at that point, and you're applying for Medicaid.
So they can come after, it's when the disabled institutional loved one passes away, they come after the living person, or they come
Correct.
after.
They can sue the spouse who's living, we call them the well spouse, but who knows, that person, for any assets that they have over the allowable limit.
And does that happen a lot?
It happens more than I would like it to happen.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
it's hard to say $150,000. Well, okay, over the span of 10 years, that's not really that much money. Maybe I used it, and maybe you can explain what you used your extra money for, what you had. And then you won't have to pay them back, but maybe you can't. Maybe you just have extra money and you can't explain it, and then they will try to recover some of the funds that they laid out.
But I'm confused though. Is it the spouse's assets that is the well spouse assets that has to be under the limit, or is it the deceased person's assets that has to be under the limit that they're suing after to pay back?
It's the well spouse's assets, because
wow.
the well spouse is saying that they can't afford to pay for their spouse, their sick spouse, disabled spouse, because they don't have enough money to cover it. But if you have enough money and you're still signing a spousal refusal, then they reserve the right to sue you for contribution.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
That's why sometimes we don't want to sign a spousal refusal.
Yeah.
Like if a person doesn't have that much in assets and you have $150,000, you don't have to sign a spousal refusal because you don't have enough over the limit. Or before you sign the spousal refusal, you think you have to go over this and think about what you have and what you're going to do with the money once you do get the Medicaid. Because then once you get your husband, let's say your spouse gets the Medicaid for long-term care, you can always do your own planning and explain that that money is no longer available to Medicaid if it's not available.
Like, let's just say they come sue me for $1 million when I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon, he transitions. It Are we expected to literally pay back $1 million, or do you make a deal? I mean, I know you
No,
probably what?
no, you don't have to. No, they're not gonna. If you don't have $1 million, they can't sue. They can sue you for 1 million. They will send you all the paperwork that shows, look, we spent $1 million. What do you have to contribute, basically? And then
Right.
they look at your assets. You give them an updated financial statement and say, I used to have $1 million, but I no longer have $1 million because it's been 10 years and I've had to, work, and I've had to do other things, and I had to use my money. So I only have, $200,000 left, and I can't give you any of it because I need it for my own care. Maybe they'll go away. Maybe they'll make a deal with you and say, we can only take a certain amount of what you have. But people think that spousal refusal is just like a blanket, um, allowance, that you're just allowed to have your own money, and your spouse's Medicaid won't, they can't come after you for anything, but they can.
Yeah.
It's
No,
just,
it's interesting. I think they can, and then you read different, like you said, disinformation that's out there. Maybe it is real information where then most of the time I've seen different things. They don't normally do it, or they don't take it all, or
no, they don't take all your money. They can't
yeah,
take all your money away. They can't
yeah,
take all of your money. And they don't always do it. What they do is they look at the application. They'll go
hmm,
back and see 10 years ago when you applied, the spouse had $1 million, or did the spouse have 300,000 or 400,000, and it's not worth it because they probably don't have it today.
right. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
they run that, they do that calculation, and they'll only take the risk of, hiring an attorney and suing you if it's worth it.
Right. And it's interesting. So, and then some people divorce, right? I mean, when Bob got sick, this is being very direct. People were saying, you can divorce, or I don't like, and still, we were in Massachusetts, and they said this lawyer guy, when we were stuck at Harvard, they said the guy, well, have you ever thought of divorcing? And then, and again, and you deal with this all day long in your practice. When we get to that moment as a consumer, we're so stressed out. We're so PTSD. We don't know what's up or down or around, because you never know if you're going to get sick. Nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them. You think these kinds of things happen when you're like 80 or 90 or 70 years old. And, you never know, right, Ida? You just never know.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it's true. It used to be a thing where people would say, well, divorce, you have to get a divorce because you're not going to be able to get you're not going to get Medicaid if you're together, because they're going to count both incomes, or they're going to count this, but now with spousal refusal and all the other things that we could do, trusts, things like that, you don't have to. And I mean, technically, you're defrauding the government by getting divorced. I don't know. It doesn't, I don't, it's not done anymore, I don't think.
right.
But it used to be common for attorneys to say, you probably should just get divorced, and then that person doesn't have anything, you take everything, and they get Medicaid. But then, then you're divorced. Then you're not their next of kin, you're not there, I don't, I think now there are so many other options out there that you shouldn't have to worry about that.
Right. And you've been so great. I'm going to do it backward, because ask Matt, I'm all over the place today. I had to park in Midtown and walk 30 blocks because it was gridlocked. And I'm kind of scattered. I'm scattered, but